Global News. 1. U.S.-China trade relations ease. The United States and China agreed to extend a moratorium on mutual tariff increases, averting a sharp rise in tariffs between the world's two largest economies. The decision came after 2 days of trade talks in Stockholm, Sweden. While the two sides have yet to reach a final agreement, the move is seen as a significant step toward easing trade tensions. 2. South China Sea tensions escalate. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel collided with a Chinese Navy destroyer in the South China Sea while the two vessels were pursuing a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. The incident, occurring in disputed waters, highlights the growing geopolitical tensions in the region. 3. Northwestern Turkey earthquake. A 6.1 magnitude earthquake struck northwestern Turkey, killing at least one person. The quake triggered panic among local residents, and rescue efforts are underway. 4. U.S. tariff policy adjustments on several countries. U.S. President Trump signed an executive order imposing reciprocal tariffs on several countries, ranging from 10% to 41%. These include a 20% tariff on Vietnam and a 50% tariff on India due to its continued purchases of Russian oil. In addition, the U.S. raised tariffs on Canada to 35%, sparking strong dissatisfaction from the Canadian Prime Minister. 5. Baltimore mass shooting. A mass shooting occurred in northwest Baltimore, Maryland, USA. Local police are actively responding, and the exact number of casualties has not yet been released. 6. Developments related to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. An attack on the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv left 31 dead and 159 injured. Trump publicly urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to reach a ceasefire agreement by August 8, otherwise he would face tougher sanctions. 7. Natural disasters and climate events. A strong 8.7 magnitude earthquake on Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula triggered tsunami warnings for Pacific coastal countries, including Hawaii and the west coast of the United States, although most warnings have been lifted. Furthermore, the intensification of climate whiplash rapid extreme weather changes has led to flooding in Vietnam's Dien Bien province, resulting in 3 deaths. 8. Other important events. Global financial markets volatile. Gold prices fall. Chip companies reach profit-sharing agreement with China. Gold prices fell approximately 1.2% as markets were confused about U.S. dollar policy and the outlook for tariffs. Meanwhile, NVIDIA and AMD reached an agreement with the U.S. to pay the government 15% of their AI chip sales revenue to China in exchange for export licenses. This agreement has significant implications for the technology supply chain. Iran approved the establishment of a National Defense Council to enhance the combat capabilities of its armed forces, while the U.S. imposed sanctions on Chinese, Taiwanese, and Hong Kong companies involved in Iran's drone program. Thailand and Cambodia accused each other of violating the ceasefire, putting the Trump-brokered truce under scrutiny. The death toll from hunger and malnutrition in the Gaza Strip rose to 159, including 90 children. Multiple world leaders will hold a video conference on Wednesday to coordinate their positions on Ukraine and the upcoming Trump-Putin summit. European leaders will hold a virtual meeting with Zelensky and the U.S. government to discuss how to safeguard Ukraine's interests at the upcoming Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. Trump has publicly stated that he will know soon whether a deal can be reached with Putin, but any final outcome will depend on Ukraine.
News. Overview of U.S. financial news in the past 24 hours. 1. Market sentiment and investor confidence. The Wall Street Journal reported that despite recent poor economic data, the U.S. stock market has shown resilience, thanks in part to continued support from a new generation of retail investors who buy the dip. This optimism has helped the market withstand the impact of negative news. Uncertainty in market forecasts was also mentioned, with the journal noting that the unreliability of economic forecasts requires investors to be cautious about short-term fluctuations. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq have performed strongly recently, with market sentiment driven by retail investors and corporate stock buybacks, but institutional investors remain cautious about risks such as tariffs. 2. Gold price fluctuations and tariff expectations. According to the Wall Street Journal, gold prices fell slightly over the past 24 hours, impacted by uncertainty about potential U.S. tariffs. Investors are weighing the potential impact of tariffs on the global economy and commodity prices. Investing.com noted that gold prices briefly broke through $3,400 per ounce, but subsequently retreated. Morgan Stanley analysts believe gold still has upside potential. The U.S. dollar index rebounded slightly after falling below the 98 mark. 3. Corporate earnings and industry dynamics. Coca-Cola, Investing.com reported that Coca-Cola's second quarter profit exceeded expectations and that it plans to launch a cane sugar product in the U.S. market. Market anticipation for the upcoming earnings report is high, although earnings per share are expected to decline by 1.2%. Boeing's stock price rose slightly by 0.17% in pre-market trading due to a recent $7 billion order, bringing its year-to-date gain to nearly 30%. Morgan Stanley recommends increasing holdings, anticipating second quarter earnings per share growth of over 50%. Tesla. Insights analysis indicates that ahead of Tesla's earnings report, the market is focused on whether its AI business can reverse declining revenue and profits. Elon Musk's future guidance will be crucial to the stock's performance. Opendoor. This popular U.S. internet stock surged 502%, attracting retail investors and sparking heated market discussion. 4. Federal Reserve and monetary policy. Investing.com reported that U.S. Representative Anna Paulina Luna referred Federal Reserve Chairman Powell to the Department of Justice for investigation, alleging he misled Congress. Treasury Secretary Benson said Powell does not need to resign, attempting to allay market concerns about a leadership change at the Federal Reserve. Jitong Finance noted that if the Trump administration removes Powell through legal proceedings, it could cause 30-year Treasury yields to surge to 5.5%, a development the market is closely watching. 5. Trade and tariff updates. Singtao Global News reported that Trump signed an executive order adjusting tariff rates on several countries, 10% to 41%, including a 20% tariff on Vietnam. Companies are focusing on washing production in Vietnam and other places to circumvent tariffs. Investing.com noted that the decline in oil prices was driven by concerns about EU-US trade frictions, with West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude oil falling to the key support level of $62. 6. Other important developments. The Wall Street Journal noted that Trump's semiconductor tariff policy may struggle to repatriate advanced chip manufacturing to the U.S., sparking market concerns about the tech supply chain. Singtao Global News reported that Trump plans to build a new $200 million ballroom in the East Wing of the White House. This move, seen as a way to leave his personal stamp on the White House, could spark budgetary controversy. Jitong Finance reported that the $500 billion Stargate AI infrastructure project may be scaled back, marginalizing the roles of investors like SoftBank and potentially reducing the project to a small data center in Ohio. Implications for investors. Market opportunities. Optimism among retail investors has supported the stock market, but caution among institutional investors suggests the risk of short-term volatility. Investors can focus on strong-performing stocks such as Boeing and Coca-Cola, while remaining wary of uncertainty surrounding Tesla's earnings report. Tariff and trade risks. Trump's tariff policy could push up commodity prices and disrupt supply chains. Chinese investors should closely monitor the progress of trade negotiations between the U.S. and China, as well as between the U.S. and other countries. Monetary policy and gold prices. The controversy surrounding the Federal Reserve's leadership could trigger market volatility. Gold remains attractive as a safe haven asset, but its short-term price may be affected by the performance of the U.S. dollar and tariff expectations.
Overall market overview. The three major U.S. stock indices fluctuated lower. The S&P 500 fell approximately 0.3% to close at 6,373, down 16 points. The Nasdaq fell approximately 0.3% to close at 21,385, down 64 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell approximately 0.5% to close at 43,975. Key news and drivers. Reaction to U.S.-China trade policy. The overall market was under pressure, partly due to investors remaining on the sidelines following the following news. The U.S. government implemented a new policy for technology chip companies, such as NVIDIA and AMD, requiring them to agree to a 15% revenue share on sales to China in exchange for export licenses. This policy has raised concerns about global supply chains and U.S.-China relations. Cautious expectations for inflation data. Investors flock to the safe haven market, pushing stock indexes lower as they await further guidance from July CPI data, due on Tuesday. Stock highlights and volatility. Upside. Micron Technology, up approximately 4 to 5% on strong earnings guidance. Intel. Shares rose 3 to 5% as the CEO plans to meet with the White House. TKO Group, UFC parent company shares soared over 10% on a $7.7 billion streaming deal with Paramount. Investors. Investopedia. Downside. C3.ai. Shares plunged over 25% intraday after earnings guidance fell well short of analyst estimates. Intuit. Shares fell approximately 5.7% on concerns about AI and small business revenue. Hershey. Shares fell approximately 4.8% due to rising cocoa prices and weather-related impacts. Investopedia. Commodities. Gold prices fell as Trump said he would not impose additional tariffs on gold, easing its safe haven appeal.
Tomorrow's market focus. Important economic data. July CPI, inflation data, released. The market will await the July CPI and core CPI data, which are expected to rise to 2.8% year-on-year, representing a month-on-month increase of approximately 0.2% to 0.3%. The market will be looking for clues on whether the Federal Reserve will continue to cut interest rates. The U.S.-China trade truce is approaching. The reciprocal tariff suspension agreement between the United States and China expires on August 12. Whether it is extended or terminated will trigger a repricing of trade risk in the market. Federal Reserve interest rate expectations are once again in focus. According to market forecasts, the Federal Reserve may further cut interest rates by approximately 60 basis points this year. CPI data will be a key indicator of policy direction. Geopolitical and diplomatic developments continue to fuel market sensitivity. The preparations for international events, such as the U.S.-Russia summit, may continue to influence investor risk sentiment and market volatility. Corporate earnings and dividend information. Rigetti Computing will release its second quarter earnings report after the U.S. market closes. American Water Works ex-dividend date, $0.828 per share, also falls tomorrow, August 12. Operational tips and risk strategies. Not investment advice. Facing the risk of CPI volatility. Avoid falling into the trap of inflation or non-inflation. Inflation higher than expected. This could delay interest rate cuts, suppressing highly valued assets and favoring defensive sectors. Significantly lower than expected. This could expose economic weakness and trigger expectations of greater interest rate cuts. This could benefit technology and growth sectors in the short term, but also suggests the risk of an economic slowdown. Strategy. Control your positions and avoid chasing gains and losses. Consider using option structures to hedge risk, such as holding a moderate amount of protective puts or building a short/neutral portfolio. Watch for unexpected policy negatives/bulls. If the trade agreement continues, it could benefit cyclical and export-oriented sectors. Otherwise, it could trigger a pullback in technology and manufacturing sectors. Strategy. Avoid heavy positions in highly sensitive sectors, such as semiconductors, and monitor volatility opportunities around the event window. Interest rate expectations are sensitive, and policy interpretations should be flexibly addressed. If data supports easing expectations, consider increasing holdings in financial, real estate, and cyclical stocks. If the outlook is tight, prioritize defensive equity sectors. Strategy. Adopt a phased approach or rolling hedging. Avoid all-in investments. Risks associated with corporate earnings reports and ex-dividend dates. Short-term volatility is expected. Rigetti cautions the market about volatility risks and recommends a small position or a wait-and-see approach. American Water Works ex-dividend date suggests short-term correction pressure on its stock price. Consider shorting or hedging with options for ex-dividend arbitrage opportunities. Overall, tomorrow's market will be highly dependent on data and policy guidance, and sentiment may shift rapidly. A prudent approach, supplemented by flexibility strategy, is recommended, including controlling positions, building positions in phases, and utilizing hedging tools, such as protective calls and option portfolio structures, to mitigate sudden fluctuations. I maintain a neutral bearish position.